There's a specific moment you probably remember. Not the fight, not the crying, not even the day you found out the full truth of what was done to you. The moment I'm talking about came later. It came when someone in your life, maybe a friend, maybe a therapist, maybe someone who loved you, said the words, "You need to forgive them, for yourself, not for them, for you." And something in you went quiet, not resistant, not angry, just quiet, like a door gently closing on its own, not slammed, not forced, just eased shut with a soft, final click. You've forgiven a lot of things in your life, more than most people know. You've excused behavior that would have broken other people. You found context for cruelty. You've extended benefit of the doubt past the point where anyone else would have stopped. But this one thing you don't forgive, and the question that's followed you since then isn't whether you should forgive, it's why you can't. Why time doesn't change it. Why even when you genuinely wish that person no harm, even when the pain is long gone, the door stays closed. Today, we're going to answer that question, because the science of what empaths experience and what researchers now understand about a specific category of betrayal explains not just why you can't forgive this one thing. It explains why that closed door isn't a wound. It's wisdom. Something needs to be established before we go any further. Empaths are not people who struggle to forgive. If anything, the opposite is true. The empath in your life, or the empath you are, has probably forgiven things that most people never would. The outburst that came from someone's exhaustion, the missed birthday from someone who was quietly drowning, the harsh words that were really about grief, the pulling away that was really about fear. Empaths are uniquely good at doing the hard work of context. They look past behavior and ask what's underneath it. They take the painful parts of someone else's experience and carry it alongside their own. This isn't just sentiment, it's neurological. In 1997, psychologist Dr. Elaine Aron published research identifying a trait she called sensory processing sensitivity. She found that roughly 15 to 20% of the population has a nervous system that processes emotional and sensory information more deeply than average. These are people who pick up on subtle cues others miss. People who feel the emotional weight of a room before anyone said a word. People who process the implications of an event long after everyone else has moved on. They are not overly emotional. They are not fragile. They are neurologically distinct. And one of the consequences of processing at that depth is that empaths are extraordinarily good at forgiveness. Because forgiveness, in its truest form, requires the ability to understand someone's pain well enough to locate their behavior inside it. You have to hold another person's humanity, even when that person has failed you. Most people find that genuinely difficult. For an empath, it is almost reflexive. So when we talk about the thing empaths cannot forgive, we are not talking about someone who holds grudges. We are not talking about bitterness or rigidity or an inability to let go. We are talking about a person who forgives constantly, generously, sometimes to their own detriment, and who has hit, in precisely one category of situation, an absolute limit. The question is, what makes that category different from everything else they've managed to release? And the answer to that comes down to a distinction that sounds simple, but changes everything once you see it. There is a difference between someone who hurt you and someone who studied you in order to hurt you better. That distinction is everything. And once you see it, you'll stop feeling guilty for the doors you've kept closed. But seeing it clearly means understanding what that second category actually looks like from the inside. Because most people have felt it. Very few have named it. The thing empaths cannot forgive is not betrayal in the general sense. It's not the lie. It's not the broken promise. It's not even the infidelity or the abandonment or the years of being misunderstood. The thing empaths cannot forgive is the weaponization of their care. Specifically, when someone took the most defining qualities of who you are, your openness, your compassion, your willingness to understand, your refusal to give up on people, and used those qualities deliberately against you. When your softness became their strategy. Think about what that actually looks like in practice, because it doesn't always look like dramatic cruelty. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's slow, and that's part of what makes it so hard to name. It looks like the person who learned over time what made you feel guilty, who noticed that if they framed their request a certain way, if they positioned themselves as the one suffering, as the one who needed you, you would set down your own needs to meet theirs. And once they learned that, they applied it consistently. Not because they lost control, because it worked. It looks like the person who watched you excuse their behavior once, then twice, then noticed that your capacity for context had no flaw, and used that knowledge to escalate slowly, because there were never real consequences. Your generosity of spirit was the permission slip they needed. It looks like the person who, early in the relationship, shared a vulnerability with you, who let you see a wound, who let you feel the pull of wanting to protect them, and then, when the relationship shifted, used your vulnerabilities, the ones you shared in return, as leverage, not as intimacy, as ammunition. And it looks like the person who used your loyalty, your unwillingness to abandon people, your deep discomfort with hurting anyone, to keep you in a dynamic that was hurting you. Not because they failed to see what was happening, but because they understood you well enough to know that you would stay. This is where the research becomes important, because what we're describing is not a moral judgment. It is a psychological one. Peer-reviewed research on narcissistic personality traits, published in the journal Frontiers in Psychiatry and reviewed across 52 studies in PubMed Central, found something that fundamentally reframes how we understand this dynamic. People with narcissistic traits do not entirely lack empathy. What they lack is effective empathy. The ability to feel what someone else feels, to be moved by it, to be changed by it. But their cognitive empathy, the intellectual ability to read what someone else is experiencing and think strategically about it, that remains largely intact. What this means in practice is that the person who exploited your care was not stumbling around in the dark. They were reading you. They understood, with some degree of clarity, what you were feeling. They identified what mattered to you. They noticed what moved you, what frightened you, what made you extend yourself beyond your own limits. And they used that information. Think about that for a second. Not a lucky guess. Not stumbling into it. A deliberate read, followed by a deliberate choice. The empath who experienced this didn't just experience betrayal. They experienced a kind of precision targeting. Someone took the most careful inventory of who they were, their care, their depth, their openness, and turned it into a blueprint. That is a categorically different injury than ordinary hurt. And the part of you that will not forgive it is not failing to heal. It is recognizing the difference. If one of those four things I just described, the guilt, the permission, the ammunition, the loyalty, if one of them hits somewhere specific, drop the word blueprint in the comments. That word is going to mean something different to every person who types it. But I want to see how many of you are here because you've lived this, not just read about it. Most of us understand that betrayal hurts. What fewer people understand is that there are different categories of hurt and that the nervous system does not file them the same way. Dr. Jennifer Freed, a psychologist at the University of Oregon, who has spent decades studying trauma and trust, identified what she calls betrayal trauma. Her research distinguishes this from ordinary psychological pain in a specific and important way. Betrayal trauma occurs when the person or system you depend on for safety is the source of the harm. It is not just what happened that creates the injury. It is who did it. It is the collapse of the foundational assumption that this person, this particular person you chose to trust, was on your side, that they were safe, that opening yourself to them was not a mistake. When that collapses, the nervous system doesn't just process the original hurt. It processes the shattering of the trust architecture it built around that person. It loses not just the relationship, but its own ability to rely on the judgment that led it there. For someone who processes at the depth that empaths do, for someone whose nervous system takes in more, feels more, and encodes more, this injury lands on a different level entirely. It doesn't pass through the way ordinary hurt passes through. It recalibrates something. And research supports the idea that for highly sensitive people, this recalibration is deeper and more lasting. Aaron's research shows that HSPs respond more intensely to both positive and negative experiences, and that the negative experiences, particularly those involving betrayal by trusted attachment figures, leave more pronounced and more durable marks. But there's another layer here that explains why this particular category of betrayal, the weaponization of care, does not soften with time the way other hurts do. Research on forgiveness and betrayal by psychologist Dr. Julie Fitness of Macquarie University, published in Oxford University Press, found a consistent profile in the offences that people genuinely could not forgive, even after years, even after their emotional pain had largely resolved. The profile had 3 elements. The offence involved deliberate humiliation or exploitation, not carelessness. The offender showed no sincere remorse, only surface apologies, often because the behaviour was intentional and not genuinely regretted. And in most cases, the offence was not an isolated event, but a pattern. Think about how precisely that maps onto what we've been describing. The weaponization of care is, by definition, deliberate. It requires attention, observation, and intention. It requires someone to understand what matters to you and then make a decision. And it is nearly always a pattern, because it works, because the empath keeps extending compassion, keeps providing access, keeps assuming the best until the moment they simply cannot anymore. The research is not telling us that these people are incapable of forgiveness. It's telling us that what they're refusing to forgive fits the exact clinical profile of harm that the human psyche registers as its own distinct class of wound. What looks like unforgiveness from the outside is, from the inside, an accurate assessment. The empath's nervous system is not stuck in the past. It processed everything. It filed the information correctly. And what it filed is not a wound that needs healing. It's a fact that doesn't need revising. But if that's true, if this really is clarity and not damage, why do so many empaths feel guilty about it? Why does the closed door still cost them something? Let's talk about what this actually looks like in the interior life of an empath, because it almost never looks the way people expect. When most people imagine someone who won't forgive, they picture resentment. They picture a person who rehearses the injury, who brings it up at unexpected moments, who has built a room in their psyche where the other person still lives, still causes damage, still occupies space. That is not what this looks like. The empath, who will not forgive this one category of harm often thinks about the person very rarely. They don't fantasize about revenge or even about recognition. They don't need an apology, though they would probably receive one civilly if it arrived. They do not carry rage. What they carry is clarity. There's a particular quality to this state that empaths often describe, and it tends to confuse the people around them. From the outside, it looks like coldness, like the person has shut down, hardened, lost the warmth that used to define them with this particular individual. People say things like, "You've changed," or "You used to be more forgiving," or "I feel like you've put up a wall." But from the inside, it doesn't feel like a wall. It feels like something much closer to peace. There's a strange absence of the old compulsion. The empath who spent years feeling pulled to explain themselves to this person, to make this person understand, to fix what was broken between them. That pull is simply gone. Not suppressed, gone. And in its place is something they might not even have a word for yet. Not peace exactly, something more like resolution. They wish the person no harm. That part is real. The care they once had for this person has not curdled into hatred. If anything, they understand the person more clearly than they ever did when they were inside the relationship. They can see, with a kind of detached compassion, what that person is and what likely made them that way. They just don't want to be near it. And this is where a lot of empaths carry unnecessary guilt, because they've been told, often and loudly, that this state, this quiet certainty, that one particular door will not reopen, is not healthy. That it means they haven't done the healing work. That real forgiveness means releasing the grievance entirely. And if the door is still closed, the grievance is still there. That framing is clinically wrong. Clinical psychologist Stephen Stosny, writing on The Psychology of Forgiveness and Betrayal, makes a distinction that is worth holding. Forgiveness, in its truest psychological meaning, means releasing the impulse to punish, to resent, and to carry a grudge. It does not mean readmitting someone. It does not mean re-extending trust. It does not mean deciding to pretend the information you now hold about that person doesn't exist. Stosny writes that even in successfully repaired relationships, forgiveness does not relieve the offender of the work of rebuilding trust through consistent reparative behavior. Forgiveness and trust are separate processes. Conflating them is one of the most common mistakes people make when they tell an empath they need to move on. The empath who closed the door is not failing to forgive in the meaningful sense of that word. They have, in most cases, genuinely released the desire to see that person suffer. They've processed the grief, understood the complexity of how it happened and what it cost them, done often years of quiet interior work that no one else witnessed. What they have not done is decide to forget what they know. And that is not a failure of healing. That is the work of healing completed. Which raises the question that almost no one asks next. If the healing is done, if the grief is gone, if there's no rage, then what exactly is keeping that door closed? What is it that time cannot touch? Here is the thing that most people outside this experience don't understand about why time doesn't change it. Time dulls pain. Everyone knows this. The sharpness of a wound in its first weeks, its first months, that softens. The acute grief of betrayal does eventually settle into something more manageable. And for most hurts, that's where forgiveness lives. On the other side of that softening, once the pain is no longer acute. But what empaths carry after the weaponization of their care is not primarily pain, it's information. They know what that person is capable of. not what they did once in a single moment of weakness or poor judgment. What they are capable of doing over time, with intention, when given access to someone who trusts them. They know this because they watched it unfold from the inside. They were the one who provided the trust. They saw exactly how it was used. And information doesn't dull with time the way pain does. Knowing that a stove burns you doesn't hurt less because it's been 3 years since you last touched one. You simply don't touch it. This is why the empath who closed a door 15 years ago, who has genuinely healed, who has rebuilt their life and found relationships that nourish them, that empath will still not open the door to this specific person. Not because they're still wounded, because they remember what they saw. And there's something important to name here, because this is where empaths often get accused of judgment or cruelty. People say they've changed. People say you can't hold on to something from years ago. People say, doesn't everyone deserve a second chance? And the empath's interior answer, even if they never say it out loud, is something like, this is not about what they deserve. This is about what I witnessed. Because the empath has access to data that the people vouching for this person do not have. They have seen the inside of this person's operating system. They have lived in the gap between what this person presents and what this person does when they have unmonitored access to someone who trusts them. This is not bitterness. It's a form of expertise. And there's a larger pattern that emerges over time in the life of an empath who has had enough of these experiences. They begin to develop what you might call a tiered system. Not conscious, not strategic, but real. There are people they will open to fully. People they'll engage with warmly, but from a careful middle distance. And then there are people, a small and specific group, to whom they simply do not extend the deep self. Not because they dislike these people, because they know, with quiet certainty, that giving that part of themselves to this person would be giving a key to someone who has already shown what they do with keys. The people around the empath sometimes find this disconcerting. The empath seems fine, friendly even, engaged, but something is different. There's a warmth that isn't quite reaching into the room, and they can't always name what's changed. What's changed is that the empath is no longer performing openness they don't feel. What you're seeing is them exactly as they are, present, kind, and honest about where the boundary lives. And this, finally, is where the empath arrives at the version of forgiveness that actually fits their experience. Not the version they were sold, the one that requires them to erase what they know and reinstall trust that was systematically dismantled. The real version. It is this: I genuinely wish you no harm. I see you clearly, and I will not be giving you access to my softness again. Both of those things held at the same time, without contradiction. That is not unforgiveness. That is the most sophisticated, most earned, most honest form of it. If you are someone who has been carrying guilt about a door you closed, if you've been told that your inability to reinstate trust means you're broken, or bitter, or not fully healed, I want to say something directly to you. The size of what you've forgiven in your life is extraordinary. You have forgiven carelessness. You have forgiven immaturity and fear, and the damage other people's damage did to them. You have given people the benefit of the doubt so many times that sometimes you forgot to give it to yourself. The one door you haven't reopened is not evidence of your failure. It is evidence of your intelligence. The part of you that registers the weaponization of your care as its own distinct class of harm is not a wounded part. It is a functioning part. It is doing exactly what it should. The science says so. The psychology says so. And the quiet certainty you feel when you sit with this, When you let yourself admit that the peace on the other side of that closed door is real, that says so too. You don't have to explain this to people who haven't lived it. You don't have to justify the accuracy of your own perception to people who never saw what you saw from the inside. The empath, who loves fully, who gives generously, who extends compassion even when it costs them something. That person is allowed to have exactly one door that they close and keep closed, not out of hardness, out of knowing exactly what they're worth.